So sometimes the best laid plans don't always work, and decided to detour from the Weaver, and we're about to head and fish the mighty Lymmvale. Conditions are not so mighty. It's absolutely bucketing down. Not something that you see people do a lot on here, so God knows what it's going to do. Mitzi's out with us, the little trooper. Optimistic, Gary? Oh. Right, hello and welcome to this week's angling vlog. This week you join me out on the banks of Linvale, on the bank with Gary and Mitzi. We're in search of anything that swims on the beautiful Lymmvale. For those that are not in the UK, it is August in the UK and normally summer. You wouldn't believe it looking at the day we've had. 100% chance of rain on the app, and you do join me at the moment recording this intro on the first gap in the rain that we've had all day. As you can see from the sky behind me, grey, overcast skies, gloomy, and one of those days where you struggle to get out of bed, get in the car and get on the bank. But sometimes the effort is worthwhile. So let's waste no time at all. Let's have a look at the swim, the setup, and how we're going to approach it. So that's where we're going to be fishing today. And like I said, last minute decision. We were halfway onto the Weaver and conditions just looked terrible. So we did make a little detour onto the beautiful Lymmvale. You can see the rain's coming down. It's a horrible day to be out on the bank. Mitzi always brightens up any day, and obviously spending the day with Gary. We've set up on a swim. We're just sat next to each other. Gary is going out into open water here, and I've just been casting down here. You join us probably about an hour into the session, and the rain has been really heavy and then a bit hazy like it is now. Terrible conditions to sit in, really. We've been underneath the brolly for the first bit, but good conditions for fishing. Been plenty of signs of fish, like you can see on screen now. Lots of bubbling, but as of yet, we've not had a bite. So the side tray looks pretty similar to the last couple of vlogs. That is because, like I say, we were supposed to go to Weaver. Got plenty of white maggot. I was going to fish the float today, was the plan, but it was just chocolate when we got there and really pushing through. The ground bait mix there has got the ground up pellet in it, the supercharged in there a little bit, brown crumb, and those little tiny little gem pellets in there as well. Some hemp and a bit of corn to go in the feeder, some corn to go on the hook, and then we've got the bait that we're going to be starting with, which is these big worms that are going to go on the hook. The same tactic that you've seen me use on the Weaver, on the feeder. Today we're just going to be using it on a still water where hopefully we'll be able to get a bite or two. My setup for the session is my 1.25 pound test curve cordon all rounder rod, and that is the quiver version. I've got the 1 ounce tip in the end. You can see down there just how clear the venue is, gin clear. A bit of a change of reel. Gary has kindly lent me one of his reels with 12 pound line on there rather than the £6 that I would have used on the Weaver. So thank you very much, mate, really appreciate it. And the setup exactly the same. We've got one of the float stops, and then we've got the feeder running in between another float stop, a couple of loops to separate, and then we've got one of the pre-tied cordon hook links. So looking down the lake, there's a couple of people on. We've got 3 lads on this bank, and there was a lad in the corner when we arrived. So that part of the lake, a lot of pressure. So when we've come down here, there has been quite a bit of activity in the area, a lot of bubbling, a few fish rolling, you know, when it's been raining. But what we've been doing is just fishing nice and close in, you know, a gentle chuck, not going too close to the tree, just coming off it. And Gary's a similar distance out as well. And with it being a gin clear venue, rather than having that approach of, like, say, a specimen carp angler where you put a lot of bait out and just wait on it, this means that you can constantly just be introducing bait bit by bit in the swim and build it up slowly, and then maggots falling through the water, with it being clear, the noise, and hopefully attract fish into the area. So while we're waiting for the tip to go round, last night I was back on the banks of the River Weaver with me little man Joshua. So I'll just play a bit of that footage now on a little session we did after work where we went in search of bream with Joshy. And I present to you the Bream King, absolutely bagging up on the Weaver, phase 1 rod, bite a chuck. Have a good time, lad?
Yeah.
Bagging up, aren't you? Absolutely bagging up. On the Weaver we were getting loads of bream and plenty of action. It's going to be very different on here today. We are literally fishing for one fish each would be a good result today. You know, it is a specimen water, and I am interested to see what our approaches do produce, because there's not many people come and sit on a seat box on Lymmvale. So in recent vlogs you've seen us catch quite a lot of bream and get loads of bites, and today just feels like one of those sessions where every fish is going to count. And after 2 hours of casting, that feeder just pulled round and we're connected to the first and maybe only fish of the session. Just taking me time. We've just got it underneath the rod tip. It does feel like a nice fish. Like we said at the start, changed the reel over at the last minute for some heavier line, which I'm thankful for. But the same rod we were catching them bream on last week on the river, I think if it's a tench, it's a very big one. It's beginning to feel a bit carpy. So this morning when we were heading to the river and we decided to make a change, sometimes it just happens right, doesn't it? And we come to catch tench, and yeah, we've caught Mr. Carp. He's not a bad one either. We're going to give him a good rest in the edge, get all the gear ready, and we'll take a look at him. But yeah, it's been great fun so far. Sat in the rain having a laugh with Gaddy, and then the rod nearly pulled in. The same tactics that we use for those bream: a big worm, a feeder, and just keep putting bait in. And everything likes worm, maggot and hemp. Just showing getting out there in all conditions is worthwhile, and having a backup plan. Today we dropped on the Vale instead of going on the Weaver for those bream. Same tactics, just shows it works no matter where you go. And it's lovely 20.5 pound carp, more than made up. Let's get it straight back, get the rod back out there, and hopefully we can get another bite. One thing that you didn't see about that capture that, you know, will last a long time in the memory for me and Gaddy, I was just questioning his decision to come to Vale and not risk going on the Weaver for a bit. And I put on James Webster, Weekend in Paradise, and I said to Gaddy, wait for the first line. And as soon as James Webster said, the wheels have fallen off, the tip bounced around with that carp, and you couldn't make it up. You know, it was one of them moments where I don't think he'd finished saying a sentence before the tip wrapped round and Gary just looked at me and said, yeah, really? And then Mr. Carp started heading over there somewhere. But yeah, it's memories like that when you're on the bank in the rain, the days where you have to make a plan B, where you just sat chilling out, that you remember. And can you just see out there them bubbles coming up? Something has definitely found those maggots. I just had another tentative little bite. Absolute nightmare. Kept me rod low because it went for the snag, and then it snagged me up down here on a branch. I've just given it a bit of slack and it's managed to free itself out the snag. It looks like a nice tench. A little lesson there in patience. It really did have me behind something. By keeping the rod low, I've put the line through a snag, and it was just a case of waiting for it to swim out. With the rain coming back down, just keeping on casting, putting those maggots over the top. The most dainty of takes. If you look at the close-up on screen now, you can just see where the catfish has had hold of this tench at some point in its life. That dark marking. So we won't keep it out too long. We'll let him get on his merry way. Let's get the rod back out there. So that does bring the session to an end there now. And thank you very much for everyone who has enjoyed this week's video. Please leave it a like and subscribe to the channel. Please look out in next week's video where we'll be announcing the winner of the Hinders bait competition from a couple of weeks ago. And all that remains is to wish you all tight lines in your own fishing. And we'll catch you all next week. tight lines.